It's a big day here because Dr. Janet Dudley Eschbach is with us, and we're going to have her come up and give you all a welcome.
Thanks so much, Greg. Wow. Thank you all for coming today. This is indeed a great day for the entire Eastern Shore, and particularly, if I may say so, Salisbury University, to see so many dignitaries here with us, and of course, our very honorable Maryland senators. You know, I do think that Salisbury University is a fitting location for this event, given how much we emphasize the importance of civic and community engagement. And that's led to, particularly in recent months, to a lot of reflection on my part. And I tell you, I cannot remember an event like this taking place on our campus or the Eastern Shore, for that matter. So I do want to commend and thank Mike Dunn and the Greater Salisbury Committee for envisioning this opportunity and for bringing the conversation to our campus. At the heart of a representative democracy, of course, is the ability to question and to hear from our elected leaders. And it seems like there's so much static and sometimes confusion in Washington, never on the shore. You know, the talk of fake news and the lack of decorum that we see on cable TV, to have such honored and well-spoken and ethical senators here and representing the state of Maryland. How fortunate are we? Senators Cardin and Van Hollen. And to think that they have come to hear from us, I think that's pretty extraordinary. Our senators have made it a point to visit Salisbury University and the Eastern Shore frequently and have done a phenomenal job responding to our issues and questions, no matter what they have on their plates before them in Washington. I'm so appreciative. In fact, when I thought, gee, I get to do this as Prez, maybe I should continue another 18 years. This is kind of fun. In any case, I'm so appreciative for this opportunity for us to have two of our nation's finest public servants here with us, and I'm truly thankful for all the support they've given Salisbury University and our great state of Maryland. Thank you, and again, welcome everyone. Thank you.
I did some research in advance of this, and I can't find a time when our sitting two U.S. senators were in Salisbury at the same time. The closest was Paul Sarbanes and Barb Mikulski were at beach replenishment in Ocean City one time together. But they were there with Roy Dyson, so it was that long ago. So to have these two men here in our town, the hometown of Paul Sarbanes, is a big deal, and we're just so thrilled. Our County Executive Bob Culver is going to come up and give a welcome.
Thank you so much. The last time I was in this room by Greater Salisbury, we packed the house also. So it says something for the Greater Salisbury Committee. And every time we come to this room, it's a full house. I want to thank so much Senator Cardin, Senator Van Hollen. It's quite an honor to be here to represent Wycomico County, to have you both here. Your leadership throughout the years through the Maryland House and the state and then on into federal has been a shining star for a lot of us, you know, that have followed in your footsteps on a lot smaller basis. So, but we do appreciate you coming down here, having had a conversation earlier with Senator Cardin. I can tell you he has Eastern Shore's interests at heart, whether it be the county airport, the city of Salisbury, and the river transportation. It means something to him. And for all those things, it means something to a lot of us. So with that, I want to again thank you for coming down today, and we wish you the best of luck today.
Another thing we're used to down here when our senators come or our congressman or governor, they're always on the way somewhere else. They're always on the way to Mako, or they're on their way to beach replenishment or some other appointment. They hit Salisbury on the way through. Today it's not like that at all. These men are here just for us, just for this event today. Now they added some stuff on, but the whole point of their trip was to come see us, and that makes us feel very special, and we're honored that that would happen. Now, Mayor Jake Day.
Thank you, Greg. So earlier today, we were able to break ground on the amphitheater on the Salisbury Riverwalk and to have two United States senators, our senators, shovel dirt. It was incredible, and we did ask Delmarva Veteran Builders to discount us on labor. But we are so proud to be that destination and to be a destination for many visitors coming to our city in a few short months. But we're so excited about your presence here that I've got a proclamation that we would like to give to you on behalf of myself and the Salisbury City Council President Jack Heath, City Council Vice President Muir Boda, and the entire Salisbury City Council. I'm going to be brief. I'm guessing, yeah, I knew you'd do that. Senator Ben Cardin was first elected to the U.S. Senate in 2006 after serving in the U.S. House of Representatives from 1987 to 2006. Senator Chris Van Hollen was first elected to the United States Senate in 2016 after being elected in 2002 to represent Maryland's 8th Congressional District. Senator Cardin has been a national leader on health care, retirement security, the environment, and fiscal issues. And he has worked across party lines to further U.S. national security and to ensure that good governance, transparency, and respect for human rights are integrated into American foreign policy efforts. Senator Van Hollen has become known as a tireless fighter for the people of Maryland. As someone who works hard to find common sense solutions to difficult national issues, and as a legislator who has worked successfully across party lines to pass legislation on issues of common concern, including both environmental and medical related issues. And these gentlemen are making history. It is thought to be, as Greg said, the first time two sitting U.S. senators have traveled together to Salisbury on Maryland's Eastern Shore for a town hall-style gathering, like this one, hosted by the Greater Salisbury Committee at the Guerreri Academic Commons Assembly Hall at Salisbury University. And now, therefore, I, Jacob Day, Mayor of Salisbury, do hereby proclaim this day, our Senators' Day in our city, in recognition of your efforts, your commitment to people over party, and devotion to a united Maryland, a thriving Eastern Shore, and a vibrant Salisbury. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yes, remain up here, and we're going to call someone special to the stage, Dr. Janet Dudley-Eschbach, please. These men apparently have a presentation.
Well, Greg, before we get into the conversation, and first of all, I know I speak for Senator Van Hollen and for myself. We don't get treated this way in Washington. Thank you so much. We're staying. We're not going anywhere. We're gonna Thank you for... And we're going to do something that's very difficult for a senator. We're not going to give opening comments, and we're going to take your questions, and we want a conversation. We're so pleased that so many people are here, particularly the students. They're our future. So it's always good to be at Salisbury University. It's always good to be with your great leader. And Janet, we just want to take a moment, if we might, to recognize your extraordinary accomplishments. Extraordinary accomplishments. 18 years. 18 years. You all know that she's changed the landscape, the physical landscape at Salisbury University, increased the number of buildings and the beauty of the buildings and the capacity of the buildings. But what she really has done is changed the lives of so many young people to make a difference in our community. She has fully integrated Salisbury University into Salisbury, putting important facilities into the city so that it's seamless. You have been recognized by so many for your extraordinary accomplishments. What you've done for health professionals and people concerned about humanity is just so well understood. It's an extraordinary record of accomplishment. And we know you're not done. We understand that. We understand that you're going to continue to do so many good things for our community. But we just wanted to take this moment to tell you how proud we are. There might be 100 members of the United States Senate. There's only 2 that have Janet as their constituent, and we're at Salisbury University. And we're going to make a presentation to you, but congratulations for a job well done.
All right.
That's very, very kind.
So I have to second what Ben Cardin just said. We are so happy to be on the eastern shore of Maryland and outside of Washington, D.C. And we're looking forward to coming back often and, of course, coming to the National Folk Festival, which is coming here. Salisbury, we're just with Mayor Day a little earlier today, and Mr. County Executive, congratulations to all of you in this community who have been part of that. And I'm looking forward to the conversation. But I had a little time to visit with your terrific president just before coming here to this gathering. And I want to join my fellow Senator Ben Cardin in just thanking you, Janet, for all of your leadership for a long period of time. And you know, the sign of a strong campus includes the buildings, and you've done a marvelous job in terms of bringing new innovation and growth to this campus. But the real sign, of course, is the spirit of the student body and the students. And whenever I've set foot on this campus, I always get a sense of excitement and engagement. I've had the chance to interview with students in the past, and we're so proud of the student body here at Salisbury University, and that's a reflection of the kind of university that you and your team have put together. So we want to thank you and wish you all the best in the next step of your journey ahead. All right, thank you very much.
Very, very, very kind. Thank you so much. So kind. Really. From us to you, it's a huge honor. Thank you.
They're making me sit on the right. All right, the first question I'm supposed to ask is, tell us about your job. So many people don't really know what senators do, and that sounds silly, but what is your job? What do you do?
Can we have an easier question to start off with? The United States Senate is truly a unique legislative body, but first and foremost, it's a legislative body. We are responsible, along with the House of Representatives, to enact the policy of our country, Article 1 of the Constitution of the United States. But the Senate truly is a unique body because it was designed to be an institution that would not move quickly, but would be a deliberative body. We certainly have carried out the first of those two. But it is meant to be a body that will act as a check and balance, not just on the executive branch of government, but on the legislative branch itself by giving rights to all. So by tradition, the rules of the Senate require a supermajority for controversial legislation so that we have more consensus in this country before it finishes its legislating. But my job is more than just showing up and voting. I had the opportunity to put a spotlight on important issues for the people of Maryland or our country. To be able to be a voice for the people of Maryland and to be a voice for the international community. America represents so much of hope for people around the world. And perhaps the most important thing we do is oversight, to make sure that those that do have positions of power exercise those positions in the appropriate way. So we spent a lot of time in trying to understand what the administration is doing, what's happening around the world, so that we can use the power of our position to make sure that the path is correct in the work that they're doing. It's one of 100. It's an incredible opportunity, and I really do thank the people of Maryland for giving me that opportunity.
Well, let me start on that point. I'm very grateful to be able to represent our state, the United States Senate, along with Ben Cardin. And both of us have served in the House and in the Senate. And the major difference between those two institutions is, as Senator Cardin said, that in the Senate, the rules require and essentially incentivize senators to try to come together on a bipartisan basis to get things done. So, for example, in the House of Representatives, everything is done strictly by majority rule. You get half plus one, and you can pass anything out of the House of Representatives. In the Senate, and there are some important exceptions, and you've seen some recently through the budget reconciliation process and the tax bill and nominations. But other than that, in order to get things done in the Senate, you need to get at least 60 votes. And you just saw that this last week, a number of proposals being put together, this time when it came to immigration and the Dreamers, a number of them getting over 50 votes, a majority in the Senate, but not clearing that 60 vote hurdle. And so the Senate, by design, is intended to try to be able to bring people together to clear that higher majority. The other thing I would add is the, of course, focus on the state. You have 2 senators representing every state, and we work very hard during the debates and during the process of putting together legislation like the budget to make sure that we're focused on the interests of the people of Maryland and every part of Maryland, including, of course, the Eastern Shore and Salisbury. We were talking earlier about the Port of Salisbury, which is the second biggest port in Maryland, and the importance of Army Corps of Engineer dredging of the port, the federal participation in airports around the country, and other efforts we can make through higher education and making sure we do our part to make college more affordable through student loans and Pell Grants. So there's that also very important aspect of what we do. Yes, we legislate for the country, but we also are very focused on trying to make sure we represent the interests of our state and all parts of our state.
That's a really good point. I noticed with the things that have been going on in Capitol Hill lately, it's like the House of Representatives a bunch of bulls. They just run into whatever the issue is. And then all the real legislating is going on in the Senate. And as consumers of news, what we see are the 4 or 5 senators who are under pressure to vote a certain way. And you see the issues debated among them. They go on TV, they talk about it. And that's how we actually learn about the intricacies of the issue is just through that process. Is that good or bad?
That people are learning through the process through watching on cable news and elsewhere? Well,
it's like, every week it's like, what is Susan Collins going to do this week? And that's going to decide how the country goes.
Yeah, no, look, my view is that the current media environment has both a plus and a minus. The plus is you can now get your information from a whole wide range of sources, right? I mean, you can get it online, you can get it through cable, you can get it through newspapers, you can get it from anywhere you want. And you would think that with the proliferation of different news sources, maybe that would necessarily bring more information and more balanced views to people. But what we find is a great paradox, which even though you have more and more sources of information, people are tuning in to those sources that they are watching on a regular basis, those that are more attuned to their particular views going in. And so you've got people who watch Fox, you got people who watch MSNBC, you got CNN, people tune into their radio show, or you've even got, of course, algorithms on Facebook, for example, where you think you may be getting a wide variety of information of different views, but they're actually selecting a lot of the information they provide to you based on your preconceived likes or not likes. So on the one hand, as I said, we have the opportunity for all these different sources, but I worry a lot about the fact that more and more people are receiving their information and news in a polarized way, and one that just reinforces the views they already have, rather than a lot of different viewpoints, and then being able to make up their minds as to the best approach.
Some advice. do yourself a favor. Even though Senator Van Hollen and I appear frequently on cable news, do yourself a favor and turn it off 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 days a week. You give yourself a break. Stay focused on what you believe is important. Don't be distracted by the news of the day. The news of the day may be very important, don't get me wrong, but it distracts you from getting something done that you want to get done, whether it's our environment, economics, immigration, budget, healthcare. Stay focused on the issues that you think are important. And Greg, I'm going to sort of disagree with your assumptions about how decisions are made in the Senate.
That's never happened before.
Yeah. Senator Van Hollen works every day with Republicans and gets things done on the appropriation bill. He's worked on an important bill for North Korea. I could go through the list of bills. And I do the same. I'm friendly with almost every member of the United States Senate, and those members that I'm not that friendly with, there are an equal number of Democrats and Republicans. So I work with Senator Corker on legislation that got a lot of attention, but how it got done didn't get a lot of attention, on what should we do about Russia and what should we do about Iran and what should we do about North Korea. Or I work with Senator McCain very closely on human rights issues. And we got a lot of things done that you didn't see on cable news, but it's done. Human rights, Global Magnitsky's the law of the land. And there are a lot of things that have been accomplished to help the people of Maryland. We're working on some health care changes that affect our unique system. And we got it done quietly, working with Republicans and Democrats in order to achieve what we need to do. And yes, we would like to see more issues resolved. We should reform our immigration system. We were not successful this week. We're going to keep trying. But it's not one member who's going to make that happen. The only way we're going to get immigration reform done is we can get 60 to 70 members together. It's not going to happen with a bare number. And that's the failure of this week, but we're going to come back to it. So it's not one member, but it's all of us working together, listening together, trying to get things accomplished. And most members of the United States Senate want to get things done and recognize the way to get it done is to work across party line.
You guys have a different situation where you are able to go home at night. And you hear the little man say all the time, oh, these elected officials, they don't listen to us. They listen to the lobbyists. They listen to other factors. But you're still you're in your communities every day. You're commuting to work. It's a very unique situation. Are you more in tune with us?
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad. No, we are. There's only a handful of senators who can live in their homes and still effectively represent their people in the United States Senate. So we are very fortunate, and to me, it adds to my mental stability to be in my community every night. It does allow both Senator Van Hollen and I to be with communities during the week, whereas that's not possible for the other members of the Senate. We don't have to spend as much time in travel, although I must tell you, the commute between Baltimore and Washington, sometimes you get to California faster than you can get back and forth. But it does give us a certain advantage. But it also can present some challenges, because it's hard to describe to a group in Baltimore why I can't be there on noon on Wednesday, because I really do have a day job in Washington. So sometimes there's expectations that we cannot handle. But yes, I think it is a major advantage to represent the people of Maryland, because I can be back in my home community every night.
So it's a blessing to be able to commute to work every day, like most working people throughout the country. And I can tell you that, when Ben and I say to our colleagues, on a Friday, let's just stick around and get our work done around here, they all look at us like, okay, that's easy for you guys to say, because they've all got to catch their airplanes and head home for the weekend to talk to their constituents. So that is a big advantage in the sense that we get to, go home and also be very quickly in touch with our constituents. I will say I have had the experience, though, when a constituent group will say, we've said we're not going to be able to make it out right now, and they say, well, look, we're watching C-SPAN right now, and you guys just adjourned, so you can be here quickly. And there's sometimes when our colleagues from other parts of the country are pleased that they're not in that situation. But it is the other thing I will say about Maryland and Virginia and some of the other states in the immediate national capital area, which is overall, our constituents pay very close attention to what's happening on Capitol Hill. And you always run the hazard of running into somebody who's always going to know a lot more about any particular issue than you will. And that's because you'll find people who are responsible for having written a law 10 years ago or 20 years ago or whatever it may be, or someone who's been very involved. And so we also have an opportunity to learn a lot from all of you, not just on issues that immediately impact Salisbury Eastern Shore, but also so many Marylanders who've been very focused on national issues over the years.
I have two potentially annoying questions to ask, and I apologize in advance. Senator Von Hollen, when you were elected to Congress, the House, you beat Connie Morello, who was a very popular, moderate Republican. You entered the House in a Republican-dominated legislature and White House, and your first day you were ranked as the 535th most important person on Capitol Hill. And I'm sure that was potentially embarrassing, but in terms of the ranking, that's where you were. Now you're head of the Senatorial Election Committee. You're one of the most powerful senators in Washington. Everyone wants your time and attention. How did all that happen?
Well, first of all, I should say in the House, and it was a great honor to serve in the House. And having served in the minority party in the House and for a short time in the majority party in the House, I can assure you if you're in the House, it's better to be in the majority party. The Senate is also, of course, better to be in the majority party, but because of the rules of the Senate that we were just talking about, if you're in the minority party, and obviously both Republicans and Democrats have been in the minority party over time, it gives you that opportunity to have a little bit more say because of the rules. So I was honored to serve in the House for many years. I was actually part of the House Democratic leadership during my time there and served on the Ways and Means Committee, and then as the senior Democrat on the Budget Committee, and had the opportunity to be involved in lots of issues. And that experience in the House has actually helped me a lot in the Senate because during that time I was able to work with a lot of the senators, both Republicans and Democrats, especially on budget issues and issues that relate to the sort of our national priorities, and now serve on the Appropriations Committee. So I am pleased to be in the Senate now, and the one thing about the Senate is because of those rules, any one of the 100 senators can sort of put down their foot and at least have the opportunity to get heard, right? We just saw Rand Paul the other day, and I give him credit because that was a moment when everyone in the Senate wanted to run home, and he wanted to make a point. And he made his point.
He shut the government down.
Agree with him or disagree with him, and the fact of the matter is he took a lot of heat from his colleagues, but he did what he thought was the right thing, both for his constituents and to make a point. And I just use that as a recent example of the fact that a senator, any senator, if you really want to be heard, you can make a statement in that kind of way. You never would have that chance in the House of Representatives.
And Senator Cardin, I've watched you my entire life, and I remember when you were in the General Assembly, and my sense is that you like being a senator, but I always thought you really wanted to be governor. Is that true?
Looking at the problems in Maryland right now, I was Speaker of the House, to me, which is one of the greatest jobs that I ever had in the Maryland General Assembly, because it's more hands-on. It was a great position. I had the opportunity at that time to run for governor or to run for the House of Representatives. There was a guy named Don Schaefer who decided he wanted to run for governor. My pollster told me I could stay in the race and lose, or I could run for Congress and win. I chose running for Congress and winning. So I'm very happy with the decisions I made, and Paul Sarbanes, to me, was one of the greatest senators in the history of America. It just represents the best tradition. And I know you should be very proud that his values were homegrown here in Salisbury. So it was a surprise to me when he decided that he would not seek re-election. I did not expect that to be the case. But I really did want to run for the United States Senate. I wanted to be in the United States Senate, and I took advantage of that opportunity. No, I've never looked back. I love legislating. I thank our executives who are here, Bob and Jake. It's not an easy job to be to have the responsibilities to administer, and I enjoy being in the legislative branch where I can be involved in policy development and oversight and working to try to get things accomplished across party line and with other people of different views. So no, I'm very, very proud of that. The opportunities led me to stay in the legislative branch of government.
So every time when there's a governor's campaign coming up and your name gets thrown out, I can tell people now that, no, he's...
You absolutely can tell him no. He's that's absolutely correct.
A year ago this week, we had a tremendous event here, Greater Salisbury Committee-sponsored event on bipartisanship. We had the governor and the comptroller here. People are still talking about the event. It was that exciting and enlightening and inspiring. The comptroller was here yesterday, and I interviewed him briefly, and he said that he still gets positive vibes from people. People still compliment him for coming down. The governor really seems to like us. We kind of have a chip on our shoulder down here a lot on the Eastern Shore. Do you guys like us?
Yes. Look.
Mr. Perdue's in the front row, and I know his business sometimes doesn't feel loved like it should be.
When I was contemplating running for the Senate, I talked to Senator Mikulski, and she said something like, "You don't understand how great it is to be the senator from Maryland. We have such great areas of our state that we have legitimate reasons to visit." Eastern Shore is one of those areas. It's a unique part of America. Salisbury is a unique community. People love living here. Our challenge is, can we make sure there's an economic future for their children and grandchildren so you can preserve this unique way of life? This is truly, I wish I could spend a lot more time here because it is a wonderful, wonderful area. I love the outdoors. I love the bay. I love the people. There's a politeness on the Eastern Shore which reminds us of the great traditions of our country. So absolutely, this is an area that we want to be able to preserve for the future. So absolutely. Now, let me just talk one moment about working together. I'm a proud Democrat. I am proud of what my party stands for. I'm going to do what I can on election time to get Democrats elected. But when campaigns are over, you got to govern. You got to come together. Compromise is not a bad thing. This nation was built on a compromise. We got to listen to each other a lot more than we do these days. And that means in Maryland, we got to listen to the people from the Eastern Shore, from Western Maryland, from Baltimore and Washington. We all need to listen to each other. And by doing that, we can have policies that are going to be in the best interest of all of us. It won't be what you would like to see or what I would like to see. We got to protect the bay and we got to protect agriculture. And they're totally consistent. Strong environment is good for agriculture. It's good for the bay. But we got to figure out a path forward. We're all in the same objectives to accomplish these aims. And you do that by listening. And you do that by being here. And throughout my career, I've always had incredible relationships. When I was Speaker of the House, you know, the members from the Eastern Shore were friends. Senator Mathias was a friend. And we talked about that. We had different views, but we listened to each other. and we got things accomplished. I love being here. I love you, and I love representing the people of Maryland.
You know, when you come across the Bay Bridge and come to the Eastern Shore, it sort of lifts a little bit of the weight off your back, and it is always great to be on the Eastern Shore, and sort of the great diversity of the shore, from the lower shore to the mid-shore to the upper shore, and all the different traditions and ways of life that have made the shore a center for agriculture, a center for the watermen, and now also a center for innovation. And the challenge going forward for our state and for the Eastern Shore is to make sure that we marry up and combine the best of the old economic agriculture and strength of the shore and the poultry industry and all of those industries that have been part of the shore's economic strength, together with the innovation that you're seeing here at places like Salisbury University as people look for new opportunities as well. And so what's great about the shore is that combination, and the key for all of us at the private sector and the public sector at the federal, state, and local level is to work together to make sure that we build on those strengths. And this university is actually a great example of how it's grown by attracting great students from all over our state, other parts of the country. And I think that if we can work together, and we have to work together to make the shore and Maryland and our country successful, then we're going to be in the right spot. Just to emphasize what Ben Cardin said with respect to bipartisanship. There are obviously going to be issues where people have big differences and legitimate debates. But at the end of the day, if you want to get things done, at least in the United States Senate, you've got to find a way to build those bridges. And I've been pleased, even in a short time in the Senate, to be able to team up Senator Toomey from Pennsylvania. We worked on North Korea sanctions legislation, working with Senator Rubio from Florida on legislations to deter foreign governments from interfering in our elections, and a number of other issues on a bipartisan basis. We work together with Andy Harris when it comes to making sure that we fully fund Chesapeake Bay protection. We disagree, Andy and I disagree on lots of issues, but when it comes to the $73 million that we're trying to fund to protect the Bay, we are together on that issue. And by the way, we're going to have to work on that, since the budget that just came down only has $7.3 million for the Chesapeake Bay, and the last one had zero. But we were able to work with our colleagues on a bipartisan basis on the Appropriations Committee, and Ben Cardin on Environment and Public Works and the other committees he serves on, to make sure that we do our best to meet Maryland's priorities and the Eastern Shore priorities.
One of the big issues here locally is the wind projects off of Ocean City. Greater Salisbury Committee has been very involved encouraging that, because we see it as a definite jobs program here for Wycomico County. We would be servicing those windmills, providing parts and labor. A lot of controversy with this. Does you guys on a federal level have anything to say about the idea with the wind farms and where we should go with that?
Yes, I believe it's a great opportunity for Maryland and the Eastern Shore, and it's a important innovation for energy, and it's also a great jobs opportunity. And Maryland really jumped to the head of the pack nationally when the Public Service Commission approved these two projects off of Maryland Shore. They're both in the range of 20 miles out. I understand that there is some concern in Ocean City. I get that. But I also believe that this is an opportunity for our state to really be a leader on clean energy. And, you know, our country is got to move in that direction. We're moving in that direction. There are a lot more clean energy jobs in Maryland and around the country now, both in solar, wind, and onshore wind, and increasingly opportunities with offshore wind. So I mentioned an area where I agree with the Congressman Harris on the Bay protection. I disagree with him on this issue of offshore wind in Maryland. He has proposed an amendment to the House Appropriations Bill that would essentially kill those projects. It would require them to be much farther offshore than is feasible, given other priorities. And so there's an area of agreement on the one hand, but an area of disagreement, and I'm fairly confident that we will prevent the federal government from ending that project. It still will have to go through a number of reviews through the Department of Interior, but I can say the Congress, I think the Congress will not be the obstacle. At least I know Senator Cardin and I will work very hard to make sure Congress is not an obstacle to what we think is a great jobs opportunity and moving in an area where we have an energy source that protects our environment and addresses climate change and other important issues.
I could just say I agree completely with Chris Van Hollen, but that would disappoint you if I don't say a few more words. I agree. Wind energy is, we need to diversify energy. We need renewable energies. Wind energy is part of our future. The economics of it is very positive, and the local economics is very positive. So I support everything that Chris said. And the federal government should not be restricting what the state can do in this area. And I'm confident at the end of the day, those restrictions will not appear in legislation coming out of Congress. I want to say one other thing, if I might. And that is, America today exports energy more than we import. So we are self-sufficient. There are dislocations in different regions and different sources. But energy cost today is relatively low, and we need to make sure we take advantage of this opportunity, particularly in our tax code, which has not been neutral on energy sources. But to be neutral, and we're working on some more tax, we just passed some tax provisions in the most recent budget agreement that was passed that was helpful in regards to this issue. But we have a responsibility to make sure our tax code encourages that diversity so that we can remain self-sufficient in energy in the future. And I'm optimistic that will be the case. I serve on the Finance Committee, and we have bipartisan support for these proposals. But bottom line is, what you're doing here on wind will be supported in Washington. We will do nothing to hurt you, and the economics of it will be positive.
I wonder what it's like to be Senator Van Hollen, because I wonder if Barbara Mikulski still calls you and tells you what you should do.
Yeah, so I do remain in close contact with Barbara Mikulski, and she keeps a close eye on what's happening in Washington. She's at Johns Hopkins University now, and I always said, and even before the latest Star Wars movie came out, that when Barbara Mikulski is with you, the Force is with you. And she obviously was a great force for good in our state and around the country. And so Ben and I keep in regular contact with Barbara Mikulski. And since I serve on the Appropriations Committee where she used to serve, I sat down with her, of course, as a member of Congress over many years, but certainly after I was elected to the Senate, and continue to seek her advice on the best way forward. She obviously developed lots of important relationships with other senators on that committee. So the answer is yes. We are still in the Mikulski force field.
And does Senator Sarbanes ever call you as his successor?
Oh, yes. I talked to, first of all, Tony Sarbanes.
Tony's here.
Tony is with us, and I thank Tony for his... Yeah. And Paul has a son. John is doing a great job in the Congress of the United States. So I hear frequently from Paul. And just to follow up on the question to Senator Van Hollen, my iPhone's been going off. I think it is Barbara Mikulski texting me. I must have said something here that either she agreed or disagreed with, but she's watching us, no question.
Gerrymandering has been an issue with the governor here lately, and I'm not sure people really understand gerrymandering. I don't know that it certainly doesn't affect the Senate. But you talk about Andy Harris, working with him. He's the only Republican representing the House of Representatives from Maryland. Is gerrymandering a problem in our state?
Well, one of the reasons I ran for the United States Senate, so I didn't have to deal with congressional redistricting.
Yeah, your district changed a lot around Baltimore.
Yeah, I had what's now, of course, John Sarbanes' district, which is both in the Baltimore and Washington area and all around the whole metropolitan area. Congressional redistricting is going to be political any way you do it. I don't care whether it's a citizen group, it's going to be political. And it's done by the states, so it's one thing to say that Maryland's doing it overly political, but how about the rest of the states? I think we would be better off in this country if we allowed communities to stay together and we didn't stretch the districts in order to achieve political ends. I think we'd be better off with confidence of the voter that they're being properly represented. I think we'd be better off because we see that we get concentrations of political thoughts in congressional districts which prevent us from having the solutions to problems. You don't have as many moderate seats as we should in this country. They're usually either Republican or Democrat and not competitive. I think we'd be better off having more competitive congressional seats in this country. It's a national problem. It cannot be solved by one state. But I was a member of the House of Representatives on the last congressional redistricting that I was in the House. I testified in Washington, Annapolis against the map because I thought it treated communities inappropriately. I think we'd be better off drawing congressional lines to keep communities together and not for partisan political ends, recognizing that any way you do it is going to have political consequences.
So I think that we need, as a nation, to go to nonpartisan redistricting as close as you can. There are good models around the country. The state of Iowa has a quasi-judicial process for line drawing. State of California has more of a bipartisan process. I prefer the nonpartisan approach. There's legislation in the Senate, which I support, which calls for national nonpartisan redistricting. And I think that that is the way you have to go as a country. And I do believe, as Senator Cardin does, that you need to address this on a national basis. And that is because if you look at the House of Representatives, right, every single vote counts. We just saw in the Virginia House of Delegates race, the whole control over the state legislature came down to one vote and they had to flip a coin. So if we want to do the redistricting right in this country, we really have to do it on a national basis. Otherwise, a state that is, controlled by Republicans can say they're not going to do redistricting. A state where there are a majority of Democrats say they will, and that leads to inequities across the system. That means you can actually control Congress by whether your state engages in more partisan district line drawing or not. So I'm for every state having to adopt a nonpartisan approach. Like the state of Iowa did. I think everyone here knows that this issue is now in the Supreme Court of the United States. They are looking at the question of what is called political gerrymandering as opposed to the other rules, civil rights laws and other laws that also impact how you can draw congressional districts. And the question for the Supreme Court is going to be, in a world where there's lots of political impact in line drawing, are they going to be able to find a bright line between what they think is sort of unconstitutionally egregious political line drawing and what is within some kind of fair limits. And so that will be their question, whether they can find a line that allows them to conclude that one state's congressional redistricting lines are okay, and another's don't meet a test of due process or other constitutional requirements. But that would be the court. Like a lot of things, I would prefer if Congress took this up and passed the legislation that would have national, nonpartisan line drawings, because for all the reasons that Senator Cardin said.
Wallops Island was a very important project for Senator Mikulski, and there were several times in her career where it got put on the cut list or the drop back list, and she used her iron will to keep that from happening. And now it's a great success story. Do you all have the same commitment to Wallops?
Yes. I mean, the very short answer is yes. I had an opportunity to visit Wallops a few months ago. It's not in the state of Maryland, but it's an important part of our state in terms of jobs and opportunities. And we're going to have to continue to work with NASA and the administration to make sure that we continue to provide support to Wallops. And one of the, NASA has an important presence in our state, both through and in Virginia, obviously, through Wallops, but also Goddard, which is in Prince George's County, Maryland, and one of the very important parts of NASA's operations. And so people don't think of Maryland as a state with a lot of activity related to the space industry, but we are. And we need to make sure that as we go through this process that we protect that. I can assure you that our other states, both Florida and California and Alabama, other states that also have a NASA presence, are always eyeing Wallops and trying to move operations from Wallops elsewhere. And Senator Cardin and I will continue to battle that, just as Senator Mikulski and Senator Sarbanes have in the past.
Wallops has a very important function for our country. It's critically important to the Lower Shores economy. We are very much focused on making sure Wallops is protected and has the support in the United States Congress. My responsibility as senior senator is to make sure that we use all 10 members of our congressional delegation on priorities of our state. Wallops is a priority for our state. I understand the people of Virginia think it's located in Virginia, but we have the jobs. Let them take care of the maintenance, give us the jobs, it's fine. But it is a very high priority for our state. So yes, in the appropriations process, we look at their budget and budget support, including the NASA budget and Goddard and all the other related programs, because it's an incredibly important part of our priorities. The mission there is critically important, by the way, so it's a combination of both. So yes, we are very much focused on the appropriations process as well as the authorization process, meet frequently with the people from Wallops, and coordinate a strategy, and we use Virginians and others to help us in implementing that.
Mike Dunn, who obviously isn't here today, asked me to ask this question as the head of the Greater Salisbury Committee. He remembers reading as a teenager, no, it was before he was born, what am I saying? He remembers reading as a young man about Lyndon Johnson as the president of the Senate, actually working to implement ideals of Dwight Eisenhower. And some partisan people saying, well, why would you do that? Why would you support the Republican president? And his answer being, my job is to move legislation in Washington. I'm the head of the Senate. I'm doing my job. The president's doing his job. So there was a feeling of bipartisanship even among people who might be partisan. Why does that not happen anymore? Why do we not respect the process and fall victim to the politics?
Well, we've seen this happen nationwide. It's in Maryland and every state in the country. There has been a greater partisan division. I hope it's a trend that will change. Most Americans are more into the center than they are to the left or right, but this is in our political system. There has been a concern that if you want to run and be a Republican member of Congress, if you don't go to the right, you could be challenged in a primary. If you are a member of the Democratic caucus and you don't go to the left, you may be challenged in a primary. So we've had this division occur in America. We saw it with the Tea Party. We saw it with some other groups that have been out there that have pulled us to a more partisan division. We're fighting that. As I said in the Senate, I think we have to achieve bipartisan results in the Senate. That's how it's designed. But it's been that pulling apart. I think most members of Congress, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, believe we're all on the same team. It's called America. This is our team. We want our president to succeed. We want our country to be safe. We want our economy to grow. And we recognize that never, even if we control all three branches of government and we're in the majority, you can't get things done on your own. You have to work together. And by the way, if you include all 535 members of Congress in the decision making, we're going to get better results. We're also going to get results that will stand the test of time, that won't be enacted 1 year and changed 2 years later when the parties change in Congress, that you can get stability in our policies. And I think that's what LBJ represented. I think that's what you saw in the great traditions of Tip O'Neill and working with President Reagan and passing a major rewrite of the Social Security Act. They were proud moments that we got things done for this country that did stand the test of time. And I think we got to get back to that, and there are a lot of members who are working towards it. I must tell you, representing Maryland makes it a little bit easier for, I think, Chris Van Hollen and myself, because the people of Maryland recognize that and want us to work across party line to get things done. And both of us can be in the leadership of bringing together Democrats and Republicans on tough issues, and we're prepared to do that.
I could hear hear Dr. Janet's beautiful bells just now, which means the time's up. So Senator Van Hollen gets the last word.
Well, look, we have a system, as everybody here knows, of checks and balances, separation of powers. The system, by design, requires people at the end of the day to reach some kind of consensus. I mean, you need a majority in each house. Then you need a presidential signature. If you don't have a signature, you have the veto. You need a 2/3 veto override. So the system is designed in a way that at the end of the day means if you actually want to move things forward, you've got to find some kind of common ground or compromise going forward. I think in recent times, we've seemed to have moved more toward a parliamentary system where, people, in the parliamentary system, of course, the prime minister is chosen from the party that's a majority, and there's a sense that there's no separation of power. Congress is a co-equal but separate branch of government, and we need to, in my view, get back to those times where both senators and members of the House exercise some independence of judgment and respect the institution prerogatives. Years ago, before I was ever thinking of running for office, I worked for Mac Mathias, a very liberal, moderate Republican senator. I worked on national security issues for him. And I remember distinctly back then that this is around 1985. Senator Lugar, Dick Lugar, was a Republican from Indiana. He was the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. It was at the time that we were passing economic sanctions against the apartheid regime in South Africa. And Mac Mathias and Dick Lugar and the Republicans who were in the majority of the Senate ushered that bill through with Senator Kennedy and others who were there on a bipartisan basis. It was vetoed by President Reagan, the legislation that the Congress had passed to impose sanctions against South Africa. And Dick Lugar and Republicans and Democrats, even though they were Republicans who were in the majority, they helped override President Reagan's veto, and that legislation passed. You don't see that much anymore, where Congress is acting more as an independent body. I hope we can get back to it. It is a much more polarized environment. As Ben Cardin said, I think it's very important that voters, all of us have passionate views about issues. And those debates are important. We should have sharp, vigorous debates. But it's also important that voters, at the end of the day, reinforce and reward people who have both strong views, but recognize that to get things done as a country, we are not going to get 100% of what we want all the time. Let's try and move the ball forward together. And we need members of Congress in the House and the Senate to do that, but we also need an electorate among Republicans, Democrats, and independents who recognize that that's an essential ingredient for moving forward as a country.
A historic occasion here on campus, in our town, in our county, in our Eastern Shore. Gentlemen, thank you for being here.
Thank you all. Thank you.